The planet Ilarion had once been called the Jewel of the Stars. Long ago, its people ruled the galaxy with wisdom, light, and knowledge. Their language, Velith, was not only words but power itself. It was said that when the Velith spoke, their machines obeyed. Their cities glowed brighter, and even storms paused to listen. But those times had passed 1,000,000 years ago. Now Ilarion was nothing but a silent world covered in dust and forgotten ruins. For generations, many explorers had visited it, searching for lost treasures or ancient secrets, but no one ever found anything that truly worked. The technology of the Velith seemed dead, and their language had vanished completely. Every scholar agreed. Velith was extinct, until the day the research vessel Ardent Star entered orbit above Ilarion. The Ardent Star was a joint mission, a small crew made up of both humans and aliens, traveling together to learn from lost civilizations. The team had explored many worlds, but none carried a mystery as deep as Ilarion. Its surface glowed faintly in the darkness, covered with silver sand and the ruins of cities that looked more like frozen dreams than buildings. Among the crew was Dr. Mara Hale, a young human linguist who loved studying ancient languages. She had joined the expedition not for fame or fortune, but because she believed that language was more than just communication. It was life itself. Words, she thought, carried memories, emotions, and the essence of those who once spoke them. Her companions did not always share her enthusiasm. The alien captain, Commander Terrell, was a tall being with silver skin and eyes like molten glass. He valued facts and technology more than myths. Ruins are dead things, he often said. We study them, but we do not dream of them. Still, Mara couldn't stop dreaming. When she looked down at Ilarion from orbit, she felt something stir deep in her heart, as if the planet was calling to her. After weeks of preparation, the crew finally descended to the surface. The landing site was chosen near the largest ruin, a massive hall built from crystal and stone, shining faintly even under layers of dust. The air was still, carrying no sound except the soft hum of the landing craft. Mara stepped outside first. Her boots sank slightly into the powdery sand. Around her rose pillars carved with swirling symbols, each glowing faintly when touched by light.
She traced one with her gloved hand.
The design was elegant, curved lines that looked almost alive. "Do not touch anything until we scan it," Commander Terrell warned. His voice came through the communicator, calm but firm. Mara smiled slightly. "Understood, Commander," she replied. But her curiosity only grew stronger. Inside the grand hall, the crew spread out. Their lights revealed vast walls covered in symbols, thousands of them, each arranged like musical notes. Strange machines stood silent along the edges, their shapes half organic and half metallic. Dust floated in the air like thin fog, and the ground seemed to hum softly beneath their feet. "Energy readings are faint," said the alien engineer, Kareth, who resembled a walking crystal. "Something under us still functions, but it's ancient and slow." Commander Terrell nodded. "Do not disturb it. We only observe." While the others focused on scanning the machines, Mara walked deeper into the hall. Her eyes followed the patterns on the walls. The language of the Velith was known to scholars only through fragments, a few symbols carved into stones found across different worlds. No one had ever understood its grammar, pronunciation, or meaning. Many even doubted that it had been a spoken language at all. But here, surrounded by endless walls of writing, Mara felt something different. She couldn't read the symbols, yet she sensed rhythm and tone, and like the flow of music. The patterns rose and fell in gentle curves, repeating every few lines, as if telling a story in song. "Beautiful," she whispered to herself. She took out her tablet and began recording. Each symbol glowed softly when the light from her device touched it, as though the wall itself was aware of her attention. Hours passed as the crew explored. They found no working machines, no signs of power, and no movement except the shifting sand. Commander Terrell grew impatient. "Another lifeless ruin," he said. "We'll take samples and leave." But Mara wasn't ready to leave. Something about this place felt alive, sleeping but alive. She stood in front of a large circular wall at the center of the hall. It was filled with spirals and star-like designs. In the middle there was a symbol unlike the others and a single glowing word. She stared at it, heart beating faster. She couldn't explain why, but she felt that word wanted to be spoken. When she returned to the ship that night, the crew celebrated their findings modestly. They had collected data, photographs, and samples, but nothing revolutionary. Mara, however, sat quietly by her desk, studying the images she had captured. She focused on that single symbol again and again, tracing its lines on her screen. The more she looked, the more it resembled a sound in her mind. Not a word, but a vibration. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine how it would feel to speak it. Outside, through her window, the ruins of Ilarion glowed faintly under the pale light of its moon. She whispered softly, "What are you trying to tell me?" The next morning, the crew prepared to leave. Commander Tyrell ordered everyone back aboard for departure. "No further discoveries," he said. "We'll forward the data to the Galactic Archive." But Mara requested 1 more hour. "Just to finish recording one last section," she said. Reluctantly, the commander agreed. So Mara returned alone to the hall. The silence inside was deep, like standing in the heart of an old dream. Her footsteps echoed softly as she approached the circular wall again. The air seemed thicker now, filled with quiet tension. She turned on her small lamp and aimed it at the glowing word. It pulsed once, faintly but unmistakably. Her breath caught. She spoke gently, almost to herself. "Can you hear me?" Of course, there was no answer. Yet she felt warmth in her chest, like a heartbeat not her own. Her mind whispered a sound, a shape of a word. She didn't know how or why, but she felt it. She hesitated. Then in a clear and soft voice, she spoke the word that had lived in her thoughts all night. "Rethna." The air changed instantly. The hall trembled with a low hum, and light spread through the walls like veins awakening. The ancient symbols flared to life, shining in patterns that rippled outward. Mara stepped back, astonished. Her lamp flickered, but she didn't feel afraid. The hum wasn't loud or threatening, and it felt welcoming. "Rethna," she whispered again. The light brightened, and the floor beneath her shimmered. The air filled with soft, ringing tones like distant bells. She could feel the sound in her bones. Back on the ship, alarms began to beep. Energy readings from the ruins had spiked to levels unseen in centuries. The crew rushed to their stations, confused and alarmed. "Mara," Commander Tyrell's voice crackled over the comm. "What did you do?" I don't know," she answered, staring around her in awe. "I just said a word." "A word?" "Yes, and now it's listening." All around her, the ancient walls continued to glow brighter. The patterns changed, rearranging themselves into new lines as if responding to her presence. The low hum rose in pitch, forming something that almost sounded like a voice. Not words, but tones filled with meaning she couldn't quite understand. Her heart raced. She didn't feel danger, she felt wonder. The ruins weren't dead. They had been waiting for someone who could hear their song. She slowly placed her hand against the glowing wall. "Who are you?" she whispered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then deep below the surface, something shifted, a deep, distant movement, like the turning of a giant wheel. On the ardent star, scanners detected tremors beneath the planet's crust. "Mara, get out of there," Tyrell shouted, but Mara stayed still, eyes wide with awe. The symbols on the wall pulsed one last time, and then everything grew quiet again. The hum faded, the light dimmed, and the ruins returned to silence. She lowered her hand and took a deep breath. Nothing more happened. Yet as she turned to leave, she realized the hall no longer looked lifeless. The air felt warmer. The walls glowed faintly like breathing. And in the quiet of that ancient place, Mara whispered to herself, "It's not extinct. It's sleeping." She walked out slowly, her heart full of questions and hope. Somewhere deep beneath Ilarion's surface, a faint light began to flicker again, the first sign of awakening in 1,000,000 years. The ardent star's control room was filled with alarm lights. Machines buzzed and screens flickered as readings spiked far beyond their normal range. Commander Tyrell stood tall in the center, his silver eyes glowing faintly as he read the data. "Energy surge from the ruins," said Kareth, his crystal body shimmering nervously. "It's old tech, very old but active. The whole area just woke up." "Location?" Tyrell demanded. "Right where Dr. Hale is standing." The commander's jaw tightened. "Get her out of there." But before anyone could send a rescue drone, Mara's voice came through the communicator, calm, soft, and full of wonder. "It's all right. I think it knows we're here," Tyrell frowned. "What knows?" "I don't know," she replied. "But it's listening." Down in the ancient hall, Mara stood surrounded by light. The symbols on the walls glowed gently, moving like ripples of water. She felt no fear, only amazement. Every line of light seemed alive, reacting to her breath and heartbeat. When she spoke, the walls shimmered brighter. "It understands sound," she whispered. "It responds to tone, maybe emotion." She took out her small recorder, speaking softly into it. "Test 1, word spoken Rethna." Response, activation of energy field, no visible threat. Test 2, attempting second phrase. She turned toward the main wall again. The symbols had changed, forming a circle around the central glowing mark. The sound in her mind returned, soft and musical. She felt it forming in her throat even before she knew what it meant. Her lips moved gently. "Elora." The word carried through the air like a wave of wind. The lights pulsed again, brighter this time, and the air filled with a soft humming tone, deep and layered. Then the floor beneath her began to glow. A ring of light formed around her feet, expanding outward until it touched every corner of the hall. The ground trembled slightly, not from destruction, but as if something massive below was shifting, stretching after a long sleep. Up in orbit, the crew watched the planet's surface change. Their sensors showed new heat signatures spreading through the ruins. "Multiple power cores online," Kareth said, astonished. "That technology has been dead for 1,000,000 years." Terrell didn't answer right away. He looked at the screen, where the glowing structures formed perfect geometric patterns. "It's not just machines," he finally said. "It's a system. Something old and vast." "And she's talking to it," Kareth murmured. Mara's voice trembled with awe as she recorded every moment. The ruins respond only to spoken words, not to touch or tools. It's as if they're alive, like a living machine. She felt the energy around her shift again. The light wasn't random. It pulsed in rhythm with her voice, as though the ruins were learning her speech. She smiled softly. "You understand me, don't you?" A low melodic hum filled the air. It wasn't a word, but it carried warmth and familiarity, almost like a greeting. Her heart raced. "If you understand me, show me your message." The light in front of her brightened, gathering into a single point. Then a faint image appeared, lines forming into shapes into a figure. It was tall and graceful, glowing with pale blue light. Not human, but not frightening either. Mara stared, speechless. The figure's face was kind, calm, and wise. It moved its lips, speaking softly in a voice that sounded like wind and bells. The words were in Velith, and somehow Mara understood them. The Watchers sleep. The voices heard again, her breath caught. "You can speak?" The being tilted its head, its glowing eyes studying her carefully. Its next words echoed gently. "Not speak. Remember." The figure began to fade, its light dimming slowly, leaving behind the glowing walls and quiet hum. But the meaning of its message stayed in her mind, as if engraved there. Mara touched her communicator. "Commander, I think the Velith left something behind. A memory that can talk. Return immediately," Trell ordered. "We need to analyze what just happened." "I can't yet," she said softly. "It's still trying to talk to me." "Mara," he said firmly. "That's an order." She hesitated. She respected the commander, but something deep inside told her that leaving now would break the connection. And she could feel it. The ruins were not dangerous. They were curious. They wanted to remember who they once were. "I'll be careful," she promised, switching off the communicator. The figure was gone, but the walls continued to glow. Mara walked slowly through the hall, reading the patterns as they shifted. The symbols began to arrange themselves into new lines. Her translator device couldn't understand them, but her mind seemed to. Somehow she knew what they meant. Images of stars, ships, and ancient cities filled her thoughts. It was like seeing memories that weren't her own. She saw the Velith people, tall, luminous beings who spoke in harmonies, not just words. Their cities floated in light. Their ships traveled without engines, powered by the sound of their voices. They lived in peace, teaching other worlds how to speak with creation itself. But then slowly their light dimmed, their voices faded, and the stars fell silent. The last of them had spoken one final command, a command that sealed their legacy until someone could speak the language again. Mara understood now. The language wasn't just communication, it was resonance. It needed both mind and heart, reason and feeling. No other species had both, until humans came. Back on the ship, tension grew. The crew tried to scan the ruins, but the readings were unstable. She's activating entire networks underground, Kareth reported. We can't tell if they're defensive or just reawakening. Terrell stood silently for a long moment watching the readings. Finally, he said, "Prepare a shuttle. We're going down." When they reached the surface, the hall's light was visible even from afar. The crystal towers shimmered like stars, and the air seemed to vibrate softly. Trell entered cautiously, calling out, "Dr. Hale." Mara turned as he approached, her eyes bright with excitement. "Commander, you need to see this." He looked around uneasy. "What have you done?" "I think I found the key," she said. "The Valeth didn't die. They left their memory behind. Their machines respond to emotion and tone, not just words. It's why no one else could awaken them." Kareth examined the glowing walls. "So the ruins recognize feelings?" "Yes," Mara said. "They understand empathy. The Valeth believed emotion and thought were two halves of the same truth. Without both, their language has no power." Trell frowned slightly. "And how did you discover that?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "It spoke to me." The commander looked doubtful. "Spoke?" "I heard their voice. It said, 'The Watchers sleep.'" The voices heard again. "That means they expected this. They knew someone would come." Kareth touched the wall. The light didn't react. He tried repeating the word she'd used earlier, but nothing happened. The ruins remained silent. Mara stepped forward and said softly, "Rethina." Instantly the symbols glowed again, bright and alive. The walls answered with gentle sound like distant music. The ruins were listening to her. Kareth stared in disbelief. "It reacts only to you." Trell looked thoughtful. "Perhaps your species carries something compatible." Mara smiled faintly. "Or maybe humans just never stopped feeling." That night, the crew stayed near the ruins to study the new readings. The air outside the hall was calm, and the stars above Ilarion shone brighter than usual. Mara sat on a rock outside the entrance, gazing at the horizon. She could still feel the hum beneath the ground, slow and steady like a heartbeat beneath the planet's surface. She spoke softly to herself. "The Watchers sleep. Then I guess it's time to wake them." A faint breeze swept through the ruins, carrying a quiet, melodic echo. It sounded almost like laughter or a greeting. She smiled. Inside the ship, Terrell watched her from the viewport. "She believes the ruins are alive," he said quietly. Kareth replied, "Maybe she's right. That world hasn't answered anyone for 1,000,000 years, and it answered her." Trell nodded slowly. "If that's true, then humanity just spoke to the stars." Later that night, as Mara drifted into sleep inside her small cabin, a soft light flickered on her tablet. The glowing symbols appeared once more. Rearranging themselves into words she could read, it said, "The voice returns. The Guardians prepare." Her eyes widened. "Guardians?" she whispered. Far beneath the planet's surface, in the deep chambers of the ancient city, something enormous stirred. The ground trembled faintly, though gently, as if the world itself was taking its first breath after a long dream. The forgotten voice of the Valeth had been heard again, and across the stars, something old began to listen. The next morning on Ilarion began with a golden sunrise stretching across the ruined plains. The air shimmered faintly, as if light itself was waking after a long dream. From orbit, the ardent star recorded strange energy waves spreading outward from the ruins where Dr. Mara Hale had spoken the ancient words. Commander Terrell stood in the control deck, watching the readings appear on the screen. "Another pulse," reported Kareth, the crystal engineer. "It's spreading farther now. Whatever she activated, it's reaching beneath the crust." Terrell frowned, his silver eyes narrowing. "How deep?" "Very deep," Kareth replied. "Almost to the planet's core. Something large is buried there." The commander looked out the window toward the pale blue planet below. "Something large," he repeated softly. "That's never good news." Down on the surface, Mara had returned to the grand crystal hall. She felt no fear, only excitement. The ancient walls glowed brighter now, casting warm light that filled every corner. She could sense the presence again, the gentle awareness of something vast and old, waiting for her next word. She pressed her hand to the wall and spoke softly. "I know you can hear me. What are you showing me?" The lights pulsed in answer, and the ground trembled slightly. Then across the floor the symbols began to rearrange themselves, forming glowing patterns that moved like rivers of light. Mara stepped back in awe. "You're trying to tell me something," she whispered. A deep tone filled the air, steady and calm. It was not frightening, more like the voice of the planet itself. Her heart began to race as she recognized a pattern within the hum. 3 slow beats, then a pause, then 3 more. It sounded like breathing. The ruins, she realized, were alive in some way. And beneath them, something enormous was stirring. Meanwhile, the Ardent Star's crew had moved closer to the surface to monitor the activity. From their scanners, they saw a series of vast shapes buried beneath Alarion's crust, long curved forms stretching for kilometers. "They look like ships," said Kareth in disbelief. "Thousands of them. Entire fleets buried under the surface." Commander Tyrell's eyes widened. "Impossible. Those ships would be millions of years old. They couldn't still function. Yet they're powering up," Kareth replied quietly. "Something is waking them." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the image of Mara on the screen. She stood in the glowing hall, tiny compared to the great light surrounding her, speaking softly to the ruins. "She's the key," Tyrell murmured. "The language. It's responding to her." Inside the hall, the glowing light grew stronger. The air shimmered, and the ancient symbols began to float above the walls, forming shapes and stars. Mara felt a rush of warmth flow through her, as if the planet itself was sharing its memory. Images filled her mind, vast ships flying through golden clouds, guided by voices singing in harmony. The Velith people worked together, their words shaping energy, their emotions guiding light. Then she saw the fall, darkness spreading through the stars, silence replacing song. The ships were hidden beneath the surface, locked away until a new voice could wake them. Mara gasped softly as the vision faded. She finally understood. "You weren't destroyed," she whispered. "You were waiting." The walls answered with a soft hum that almost sounded like approval. Her communicator crackled. "Dr. Hale, report," said Tyrell's firm voice. "Commander, I think I've found the truth," Mara said, still staring at the glowing patterns. "There are ships beneath the ground, thousands of them. They were built to protect the galaxy, not to destroy it. The Velith put them to sleep, waiting for someone who could speak their language again." Tyrell's tone was cautious. "And that someone is you?" "I don't know why," she admitted, "but they respond only to human emotion. I think the Velith left this power for whoever could feel the world as they did, with empathy, not control." Suddenly, the entire ground began to tremble. The sound was deep, steady, and ancient. Dust fell from the high ceilings as cracks of blue light raced through the stone floor. Kareth's voice came through the communicator, panicked but fascinated. "Energy spike. Massive movement underground. Something is rising. Multiple objects breaking free from the crust." Mara stumbled slightly but kept her balance. She looked outside through a crack in the hall and saw the ground shifting far in the distance. Mountains of stone broke apart, and beams of pale light shot upward into the sky. She watched in awe as the first ship emerged, an enormous vessel of silver and blue metal, glowing faintly like a star. The sand and rock fell away from its surface, revealing elegant curves and long wings etched with ancient patterns. It rose slowly, silently, with perfect grace. "By the stars," Mara whispered. From orbit, the crew of the Ardent Star watched the same sight unfold. One by one, the massive ships lifted from the planet's surface, shining like mirrors in the dawn light. Kareth could hardly believe his readings. "Their cores are still intact. They're drawing power from the planet itself," Commander Tyrell said quietly. "They're answering her call." Back on the surface, the air around Mara vibrated gently, filled with music-like tones. The glowing walls dimmed as if their purpose was fulfilled. The ships above the ruins hovered peacefully, their lights reflecting across the silent plains. Mara felt tears in her eyes. Not of sadness, but of wonder. She could sense their thoughts, not words but feelings, like distant voices thanking her for awakening them. "You're free," she whispered softly. "You can fly again." In reply, the ships glowed brighter. Then one of them sent a beam of soft blue light down toward her, touching the ground just before her feet. It wasn't hot or harmful. It was warm like sunlight after rain. The communicator buzzed again. "Dr. Hale!" "Are you safe?" Tyrell's voice sounded tense. "I'm fine," she said, smiling slightly. "They're not dangerous. They're beautiful." Mara, listen carefully, Terrell said. Those ships are ancient war vessels. We can't know what they're programmed to do. They're not weapons, she replied gently. They're guardians. That's what the Valeth called them. They were built to protect life, not destroy it. The commander sighed. Even guardians can be dangerous if misunderstood. We need to control this situation. No, Mara said firmly. You can't control them. You can only speak to them. In orbit, the Ardent Star's sensors suddenly detected communication signals coming from the ships, thousands of them, all transmitting the same pulse pattern. The signals were not directed at any single location. They spread outward across the stars, repeating the same phrase in the ancient Valeth tongue. Kareth translated the pattern through the database. It says, "The heart has spoken. The sleep ends, the heart," Terrell repeated, glancing toward the screen showing Mara standing on the surface. They mean her. On Alarion, Mara felt the air grow calm again. The ships hovered silently, waiting for her next word. She closed her eyes and tried to listen, not with her ears but with her feelings. She could sense their question, soft and patient. What now? Mara thought of the galaxy above, of all the young civilizations still afraid of each other, still fighting over small things while forgetting how to listen. The Valeth had once united worlds through understanding. Maybe these ships could do that again. She spoke clearly, her voice gentle but strong. Protect. Do not harm. Bring light to those who have forgotten peace. The ships glowed brighter as if acknowledging her command. Then they began to rise higher, their enormous forms reflecting the sunlight. From the ardent star, Terrell watched in stunned silence as the ancient fleet ascended slowly toward the upper atmosphere. They're leaving the planet, he said quietly. They're forming a formation around us. Mara's voice came through the communicator, calm and full of awe. They're not leaving. They're gathering. They're waiting for something. What? Asked Terrell. She looked up at the ships, her heart filled with wonder. A purpose, she said softly. A new beginning. Far above, the ships aligned perfectly around the ardent star, forming a ring of light. Their energy fields connected, creating a vast halo that surrounded both the fleet and the planet. Streams of gold and silver light flowed between them like rivers among stars. Kareth's hands trembled over the controls. They're transmitting a signal, sending data through subspace at incredible speed. Terrell turned toward the main screen. To where? Kareth checked the readings. Everywhere. Across the galaxy. The commander looked out the viewport, his voice almost a whisper. The galaxy is about to hear their song again. Back on the surface, Mara stood alone in the ruins, surrounded by quiet light. She watched the ships rise higher until they looked like stars in the sky. Her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke softly to the air. You're not alone anymore. We remember you. For a moment, a soft voice answered inside her mind. Not in words, but in feeling, gratitude, peace, hope. And then, slowly, the ships began to ascend into space, carrying with them the first echo of the ancient language spoken by human lips. The silence of Alarion was no longer empty. It was full of song. The morning light over Alarion was pale and silver, shining gently on the hovering ships that filled the sky. The ruins below glowed with strange energy, their once dead halls now breathing with life. The crew of the Ardent Star stood outside their ship, gazing up at the impossible sight. Enormous vessels, sleek and alien, floated silently above the ancient city like giants returned from sleep. Dr. Mara Hale stood near the center of the old courtyard, her eyes lifted to the sky. Her heart still raced from the events of the night before. She had spoken the ancient words and the ships had responded, not with violence but with awakening. The others were still unsure what it all meant. But Mara knew deep down that this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Captain Sarek, the tall, silver-scaled alien who commanded the Ardent Star, stepped beside her. His eyes flickered with nervous color. Dr. Hale, he said slowly, these ships, are they weapons? Should we be afraid? Mara looked at the shining forms above. I don't think they're weapons, she said softly. They're listening, waiting for something more. Professor Rill, the insectoid scholar, clicked his wings uneasily. Waiting for what? They have been asleep for millions of years. What could they possibly be waiting for? Mara turned her gaze toward the glowing temple entrance. For someone to understand, she said. Inside the ruins, the air was cool and filled with a soft hum. The glowing symbols along the walls pulsed in time with her heartbeat, like the ruins themselves were alive. Mara slowly approached the central hall, where a crystal column stood surrounded by faded metal panels. The moment she stepped closer, the column lit up with a beam of blue light. Everyone gasped. A figure appeared within the light, tall, graceful, and shimmering. It was neither human nor any alien species known to them. Its body seemed made of light itself, flowing like water. The figure spoke in the old tongue, and though none of the others understood it, Mara did. The language filled her mind like a song she had always known but never remembered. The figure's voice was calm and warm, carrying no threat. "If you can hear this," the being said, "then the stars have turned once more. We, the Veilith, left this message not for our kin, but for those who would rise after us, those who could feel as we once did." Mara repeated the words softly in translation. The crew listened, silent and awestruck. The being continued. "We saw our end long before it came. Our power grew, but our hearts grew cold. We built wonders, but forgot why we built them. We lost the meaning of our own voice. So before the last of us faded, we left this world to sleep. We sealed our ships, our knowledge, and our hearts in crystal and silence, waiting for a voice that would remember what we forgot." Mara's voice trembled as she translated. They knew they were fading. They didn't want their power to be lost. They wanted it to be found by those who understood life better than they did. Captain Sarek frowned. "And they believe that's us?" Mara smiled faintly. "Not just us, humanity, but maybe everyone who still feels hope." The figure in the light raised a hand. The hall brightened. Symbols rearranged themselves across the walls, forming lines and circles that shimmered like starlight. Mara stepped closer, drawn by an invisible pull. "We saw your kind," the Veilith voice said, "in the dreams of the cosmos. You are born from a small blue world, fragile yet bright. You reach for the stars not out of greed but curiosity. You break yet rise again. You fear yet dream. That balance of heart and reason is what we lost, and what you found." Mara's breath caught. The message was not only a recording, it felt alive, as if the being could sense her presence. "Dr. Hale," Professor Rill whispered, "this is impossible. The Veilith foresaw humans, long before our world even existed." "Maybe not saw," Mara murmured, but hoped. They hoped someone would come, someone who could carry their light forward. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Outside, the ships began to move again, rearranging their formation in the sky. Their glowing engines pulsed in rhythm, forming a ring of light above the ruins. The crew rushed outside as a massive beam of energy connected the ships to the crystal hall. The light surrounded Mara, lifting her slightly off the ground. The others shouted her name, but she could not hear them. The words of the Veilith flowed through her mind faster than she could think. It was as if the ancient knowledge of an entire civilization was pouring through her consciousness. Their science, their art, their sorrow, the voice spoke once more. But this time it spoke directly to her heart. "You carry our memory now, child of Earth. Do not let your kind repeat our fall. Use our gifts with wisdom. Let your voice be the bridge between the lost and the living." Then the light dimmed and the figure began to fade. Its final words echoed softly. "The heart that remembers life shall always awaken the stars." When the light faded, Mara collapsed gently onto the floor. The others rushed to her side. Her eyes were wide open, glowing faintly with blue light, but she was breathing calmly. "I saw them," she whispered. "I saw everything, in their cities, their stars, their end." "What did they show you?" Captain Sarek asked quietly. "That the Veilith destroyed themselves," she said. "They became too logical, too proud. They forgot to feel. Their creation stopped listening to them because their voices lost emotion. That's why the ships woke only for a human voice, because we still feel what they lost." The crew stood in silence, each one absorbing her words. As the day turned to evening, Mara sat outside the ruins with her datapad, recording every symbol and every memory that remained in her mind. The ships still floated above, silent but peaceful. They no longer seemed like threats. They seemed like watchers, ancient guardians waiting to serve again under new purpose. The stars above Alarian twinkled faintly through the clouds. For the first time, Mara felt connected not just to her crew, but to something far greater, the long chain of life that stretched across the galaxy. Professor Rill joined her quietly. "Dr. Hale," he said, his voice softer than usual, Do you think the Veilith truly believed in us? Mara looked up at the ships, her face calm. I think they believed in hope, she said. And maybe that's enough. Later that night, she stood alone before the glowing column again. The hall was quiet, but the air carried a faint hum, a heartbeat of the planet itself. She placed her hand on the crystal and whispered in Veilith, "Thank you for trusting us." The crystal pulsed softly, as if answering her. For a moment, she thought she saw faint shapes of the Veilith walking among the ruins, smiling. Not ghosts, but memories made of light. Mara smiled back. "We'll take care of your legacy," she said. "I promise." When she returned to the camp, the others had already begun transmitting reports to the Galactic Council. Word of the discovery would soon spread. Entire worlds would hear that humanity had awakened the ships of the Veilith, not through strength but through understanding. But for Mara, it wasn't about fame or glory. It was about connection, between the past and the present, between logic and emotion, between creation and its creator. The ancient language of the Veilith was no longer extinct. It lived again in her voice, and through her, in the hearts of everyone who believed that even the smallest voice could awaken the stars. She looked up one last time before going inside. The ships gleamed softly, forming a constellation above the ruined city. They seemed almost alive, breathing with silent purpose. And for the first time in many millennia, Ilarion was no longer a dead world. It was alive, reborn through a single human voice that remembered what it meant to feel. The sun of Ilarion rose slowly over the silver horizon, casting golden light across the ancient ruins. The air was calm, but it carried a strange hum, a sound like a distant choir of voices singing through metal and wind. The great ships still floated in the sky above, silent and steady, their smooth hulls shining like mirrors of dawn. Dr. Mara Hale stood outside the ardent star, watching them. Her heart was full of both wonder and uncertainty. The message of the Veilith still echoed in her mind. The heart that remembers life shall always awaken the stars. For hours she had thought about those words. What did they truly mean? Was this awakening meant to change only Ilarion or the entire galaxy? She did not yet know. But deep inside she could feel that something was still unfinished. Captain Sarek joined her, his silver eyes reflecting the morning light. "The ships have been silent since last night," he said. "No movement, no signals. Are they waiting for another command?" "Maybe," Mara said quietly. "Or maybe they're waiting for us to understand their purpose." Professor Rill stepped closer, holding his datapad. "Dr. Hale," he said, "the energy readings are climbing again. All 12 ships are charging at the same time. It's like they're preparing for something huge." Mara looked at the glowing sky. "Then it's time," she whispered. The crew gathered in the ruins where the ancient crystal still pulsed with a soft blue light. The floor beneath their feet vibrated gently, as if the planet itself was breathing. Mara approached the column and placed her hand upon it. The symbols across the walls responded immediately, flaring into motion. A deep voice, and not human but gentle, filled the hall. It was the same voice from the message, the voice of the Veilith. "Child of Earth," it said, "you have spoken our words with truth. But our work is not yet done. You have awakened the Guardians. Now they must see the stars once more." The moment the voice faded, a beam of light shot upward from the crystal through the open roof of the temple, connecting to the nearest ship. One by one, the other ships aligned, forming a circle of light that stretched high into the sky. Everyone outside could see it. A giant ring of glowing vessels around the planet, radiating with power. The light grew brighter until even the stars began to fade from sight. Captain Sarek's voice trembled. "What are they doing?" Mara closed her eyes. "They're reaching out to the galaxy." The ships began to sing. It was not music in the human sense, it was a vibration, a resonance that spread through the air and deep into the ground. Every stone, every tree, every crystal on Ilarion vibrated in harmony. The ardent stars' systems flickered yet remained stable, as if the ships were careful not to harm anything. Then something astonishing happened. The sky above Ilarion changed. Streams of light began to pour outward from the ring of ships, flowing into space like rivers of gold. The streams reached distant stars, spreading across constellations, awakening old stations and satellites that had long been forgotten. Professor Rill watched the readings in awe. They're transmitting energy across multiple systems at once. It's like they're rebuilding an ancient network. Mara smiled faintly. The Valeth Empire is returning, not as rulers but as knowledge. They wanted their wisdom to live again, but not in the same way as before. They wanted others to share it. Inside the ruins, the crystal column changed color, from blue to white, then to soft gold. The walls shimmered and displayed images from the galaxy, stars being lit, ancient machines reawakening, and worlds long dead now shining with life. The holographic figure of the Valeth appeared once more. Its form was fading, but its presence was peaceful. We were never meant to rule forever, it said. We only wish that our mistakes would not be repeated. The gift of the Valeth is not power, it is memory. It belongs now to you. The figure looked directly at Mara as though it truly saw her. Speak once more, child of Earth, and complete what we began. The entire crew looked at her. The air felt alive, trembling with unseen energy. Mara took a deep breath and stepped forward. She could feel the language forming inside her mind again, not as something learned, but as something remembered. She lifted her head toward the sky and began to speak in the Valeth tongue. Her voice was calm but strong, each word carrying warmth and emotion. The sound echoed through the ruins and up into the ships above. As she spoke, the light around her grew brighter. The ships responded immediately, glowing like suns. Their engines pulsed in time with her heartbeat, and the air filled with waves of color that danced across the land. Then came the final word, a single phrase filled with peace and promise. When Mara spoke it, the entire world seemed to stop for a heartbeat, and then the ships rose. They ascended higher and higher, their glowing trails painting the sky with rivers of gold. The air shimmered as the massive vessels moved into orbit, aligning themselves perfectly above Alarion. From there, they began to project beams of light toward other systems, each beam carrying a message, a pulse, a call to every corner of the galaxy. The crew aboard the Ardent Star watched silently from the viewing deck. Their instruments showed impossible readings, ancient relay stations coming online, forgotten networks responding, and dead satellites suddenly broadcasting again. Captain Sarek's voice broke the silence. They're waking up the old Valeth gateways. Systems thought lost are reappearing. This changes everything. Mara watched, her eyes full of tears that glowed faintly in the golden light. It's not just the Valeth returning, she said. It's hope returning. Moments later, the ships changed formation. They spread across the sky like a constellation, surrounding Alarion. Their lights pulsed together one last time, then merged into a single massive wave of energy that rippled across space. Every star in the nearby sector brightened. Every world, every ship, every lost traveler could see a new symbol glowing in the night sky, a circle surrounded by 12 points of light. It was the mark of the Valeth reborn, carried now by humanity's voice. The Ardent Star's communication panel came alive with messages. Fleets from distant colonies, stations from forgotten sectors, all were reporting the same thing. Their systems had received a signal in a language no one had heard before, yet somehow everyone could feel its meaning. It was a message of unity, of renewal, of life. As the last echoes of the light faded, the ships began to disappear. One by one, they turned into beams of gold and vanished into the stars. Mara stood silently, watching until the final ship was gone. The sky above Alarion was calm again, but the air still shimmered faintly, as if a quiet presence remained. Captain Sarek placed a hand on her shoulder. "Dr. Hale," he said gently, "they're gone. But the galaxy will remember this day." She nodded slowly. "They're not gone. They've just gone home and back to the stars where they came from, and they left something behind." Professor Rill looked around. "Left behind? What do you mean?" Mara smiled. "Us, they left us to carry their memory. We are the new voice of the Valeth." That night, as the Ardent Star prepared to leave Alarion, Mara stood at the observation deck one last time. The ruins below glowed faintly in the moonlight. "Peaceful and alive," she whispered softly in Valeth. "The stars are listening." And far above, in the darkness of space, a faint golden light flickered in response, as if the ships, wherever they had gone, had heard her words. Weeks later, across hundreds of systems, people began to speak of the human voice. Reports spread of transmissions filled with warmth and harmony. Machines that had not worked for centuries started to respond to emotional speech, not commands. And in every corner of known space, one name began to be whispered with respect: humanity. The new speakers of the ancient tongue. The galaxy had seen many powerful species before, but none like this, none whose greatest strength was not technology or numbers, but the ability to feel, and so the legend began. The language that was thought extinct was spoken again. The ships that slept beneath stone rose to the stars, and a human voice reminded the galaxy that emotion was not weakness, it was life itself.